matter, so that we're able to get the real answers from them. Thank you so much. Please give them a round of applause.
Thank you so much to our panelists and mostly our facilitator, Tabang. I see you are trying out your skills as Trevor Noah here as well. Well done for that. Thank you so much. Let's give them a round of applause one more time. Thank you so much. And right now, though, we're moving on to our next speaker, who's going to be talking about bridging the digital divide with skills that matter. Now, it's very important to talk about skills and to talk about technology, because a lot of people in a country that has such a high unemployment are very worried about what happens when technology starts taking over their jobs. And how do we ensure that we are now aligning whatever it is that we're doing as a country to the skills that are needed in this fast-moving world of technology? I'm going to ask now to come forward, and once again, it's a good thing that we have technology. We can have pictures and align the pictures with the person. Because when I read that we have Mr. Imran Khan, I thought we were talking about the Prime Minister of Pakistan. I was so excited. But I got even more excited knowing that it's actually the managing executive from Vodacom, because Vodacom has been investing so much money in the development of technology, especially in Limpopo province. I know they have recently just spent a whopping 500 million rand just to ensure that they're improving technology there. So the work that Vodacom is doing is quite phenomenal out there. I think the smart city dream is going to be a reality very, very soon. I'd like to give this opportunity to Mr. Imran Khan to come forward and talk to us further about bridging the digital divide. But I don't see Mr. Khan here. I don't know if he's here. Can't see him at all. Okay, so we'll quickly move on. I'm back now to the excitement about Pakistan, I guess. And I'm gonna now hand over to Miss Anisa Pasha. I don't know if she's here, and she's going to be talking about mastering digital leadership for transformation. She is the acting chief director, strategic IT, all the way from the Western Cape. Are you still miking her? Okay, while you do that, let me quickly ask for the QR code to quickly go up. This is the code that we're going to be using for our pictures. If you have been with us the whole day today, I'm sure you'd like to see a picture of yourself. Please just capture it and scan it, and then you can get access to those pictures. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a round of applause to Ms. Anisa Basha.
Hoping the sound is working. Yeah, good morning. And the speaker that went first helped us in terms of the protocol, so I'm just going to say all protocol observed. I had prepared quite a few, introductions, and I was going to base it on the person that came before me, which was the eminent Imran Khan. So unfortunately now I've lost that opportunity, so now I've got to go with Pala Pala. So I did think that they set me up beautifully when they had Mr. Pala and Mr. Khan coming before me, and then I have to talk about digital leadership. So yes, I'm from the Western Cape. That's normally a conversation starter. But why am I on the stage today? It was because the CIO, Mpelo, when he visited the Western Cape with the entire cabinet of KZN, spent time with our cabinet in the Western Cape and looked at doing things differently. So yesterday, you heard and saw a lot about driving change differently in this province. And in fact, you saw the Premier standing on the stage and signing the pledge and saying that he's going to drive it through inclusion, a spirit of inclusion and a spirit of collaboration. So when I received the request to speak at the summit, I was quite excited about it until I saw what was the title of the slot that I was going to do. So I did think, what do I know about digital leadership? But then, like the speaker that went before me, I'm going to pick on him quite a bit because he picked on his panel quite a bit. And I love the jibe that he did because you always are considerate of your panelists, but sometimes they derail you. And then you think, how am I going to lift in terms of the panel? But you did a splendid job. So, Jacinta, thank you very much for introducing me. And I'm going to go and start with some of the things that landed with me yesterday. But before I do that, so I'm from the Western Cape, and I'm the digital transformation lead. And by design, digital transformation is disruptive in nature. So they already speak to me, when they see me entering a room, they say, here comes the disruptor. So I'm going to disrupt a little bit this morning, because for me it's important to know your audience, to know who it is that's in the room. So I'm going to ask, will all the service providers, if you're representing a service provider today, will you raise your right hand? So that would be the hand that most of us write with. Raise your right hand if you're from a service provider. Right, great. If you're an innovator, so yesterday we had a lot of innovators who came here and pitched. They were very courageous, and they did it in a great way. If you're an innovator, raise your right hand. I did see some of you, and I'm going to pick on you again later, right? Because I really liked some of the pictures. And then if you're a public servant, raise both your hands. Because you're the people I want to speak to today. Because very often, us as public servants, we get a bad rap. People come on the stage and they talk about pala pala and the fact that we're sitting on a couch, and if there's something there, I'll take it. We have a bad rap. But actually, as public servants, my message to you today is, you're the most important people in this room. Don't be apologetic about being a public servant, because definitely I'm not. You're confident, you're hardworking, you have a set of work ethics that is admirable. So own your space. And yes, the conversations with our communities are difficult, because they start with, oh, it's you again from government. But they should end with, you are change makers. You are changing the way that we do business. And digital transformation gives us that opportunity. Now you know why they've asked me to talk about digital leadership. Because I believe that all of you in this room, whether you're a service provider, whether you're an innovator and a young person, or whether you're a public servant, you're a digital leader, right? Because you're leading in your home, in your communities, in your places of work. But to move on, because I'm still on slide number 1. So for me, the key takeaways yesterday definitely has to be, it started with the Premier, speaking about the fact that, and I see why people kept turning their head, that screen is very small. Digital transformation is not a luxury. It's a necessity. It's part of our DNA. It's part of what we do every single day when we transact. So as government, it should also not be a nice to have, an add-on. It should be something that enables everything that we do on a daily basis. But very importantly, the Premier also spoke about the fact that it must be rooted in ethics, inclusion, and accountability. And I'm going to ask you today through this masterclass, because the class must be interactive, right? It mustn't be FYI. Okay, you come, you see a PowerPoint presentation, you say, oh, great. You actually have to see whether your audience has learned something. So this session is going to be a little bit interactive. It's not just going to be raise your right hand, raise both hands. I'm actually going to ask you to think about, in the next few slides, have we grounded ethics, inclusion, and accountability in where we want to go? Not only as a province, but also as a nation in terms of digital transformation. And then a very important statement that the Premier made, which landed with me, was the fact that the province's strategy is guided by the principle that technology must serve the people and must not leave them behind. It's because of the principle of inclusion and driving inclusion, bridging the digital divide. And again, I was expecting the speaker before me to speak to the digital divide. So oops, Imran, missed opportunity. Then Dr. Sandile, I saw him standing there in the exhibition area, and I was going to call him out. He made the bold statement that we must address the culture, because transformation is not about changing the lack of efficiency. If your business model in government is that you are providing an inefficient service, then transformation's not going to fix it. You've got to fix it at the root. And that is about behavior. And I'm going to speak to that later when I speak to the value chain in terms of digital transformation. And then Helen was sitting there earlier. She's also out there with Dr. Sandile, and hopefully someone will tell them we're speaking about them. They'll come back into the venue. She spoke about the fact that we've got to be bold and courageous. But when you're bold and courageous, as the speaker and the panel that's gone before me said, and even the first speaker this morning spoke about this, in the fact that, yes, be bold. Ah, there comes the good doctor. Speak about being, and there's Helen. She's coming in now. Put the guardrails in place. Be sure that you have the scaffolding. And I thought that's a very profound way of saying that you've got a responsibility to, one, be bold and courageous and innovate, but you've also got to ensure that you've got the opportunity there to, because innovation is about failure. If you haven't failed, you've not innovated. But it's about putting those measures in place. And then last but not least, Mandla, and he was saying that he was going to be here today, so I put him on the slide. He said change needs to be visionary, and you need a committed leadership. And that's very important. And it was really, really striking that this province, yes, you can take a pic, Dr. Sandile, I've quoted you, that your premier stood on the stage and made us all recite the pledge in terms of digital transformation. And if that ever gets out onto social media, I know that the DG, my DG, will be phoning me to ask me if I've now moved to KZN. But that neither here nor there. Digital transformation has a value chain, right? And I said to you, look out for ethics, inclusion, and accountability in the value chain. Some call it a value chain, some call it an ecosystem, some call it an operating, things that you need to consider when you think about digital transformation. So we've had lots of service providers standing here on the stage before me, and they spoke about how they will enable digital transformation, how they were going to come forth and help us in terms of digital transformation. So this is giving you insight in terms of the value chain. So, Mpilo did ask me, use the Western Cape as a case study. But it's not about, and I don't want it to come across as bragging rights. But as the Western Cape, I said to him a couple of weeks ago, you are our biggest competition. Because like you, we are onto our second iteration of 5 years in terms of digital transformation. But it is not about competing with each other. It's about using the lessons of the one and filter it through to the other and vice versa. So yes, there's a value chain, and it starts with a strategy, which you saw yesterday. It was presented here beautifully by the Premier. And he also presented in that strategy 5 pillars or enablers, which I'll speak to a little bit later when I speak about the digital government model framework. It starts with your strategy, but it doesn't end there. Because a strategy is nothing without a plan. And that's how I got the title of the Digital Transformation Lead for the province. Because we had a strategy, but we didn't have an implementation plan. So I was brought in to help to bring together an implementation plan which helps us to carve. And again, a lesson which in KZN and in other provinces has worked well, is looking at what do we then put into that implementation plan so that it becomes something that speaks to the customer. So the customer is very important in the value chain. You'll see there in the slide, it speaks about consultation, it speaks about citizen or resident participation, and innovative integration of technology. So people feel that they've used a service which they have derived value from. So one of the speakers yesterday spoke about, he wishes he could go and he could do his driver's license online. So I wanted to raise my hand and said, you can. You can go and do your driver's license online. In fact, you can go through, and my colleague, I said I'm going to pick on her, but I'll pick on her later. You can, in the Western Cape, go through a drive-through center. You don't get out of your vehicle. You drive through, you know that when you go to McDonald's, in the drive-through, you can now get your license, also drive-through. And why do we do that? It is about providing people with opportunity of different points of access. So yes, as government, we don't always get it right. But the point I want to make, it is about acknowledging that there is a client, and that's the citizen, and part of the value chain is bringing that citizen's voice into the conversation. The governance aspect, very important. You heard the earlier speakers speaking about cybersecurity and the lack of trust. How do we drive trust? Trust is driven through putting secure measures in place so people know and they feel that their data is secure. And one of the panelists who was put on the spot was asked, have you had a breach? So in government, we never speak about a data breach. We talk about an intrusion or et cetera, but we never use the word bridge. But yes, with cyber working and moving as fast as it is in terms of when you've developed something, the deviants have already thought about a way to tackle it. So it's about preparing yourself and putting the measures and being resilient. I think that's the point around security. And then last is not least, and it's something that as government, we don't like to do. We don't like to put ourselves up to the light and say, you know, how are we doing? Are we doing okay? If you had to score me now, would I be a 1, a 2, a 3, or a 4? What would it be? Would I be a 1? Let's see, how many 1s? 2s? We don't like to put ourselves out there. But in fact, these sessions by design are an opportunity to you to add your voice and to say, this is what we think you need to do in order to achieve best practice. That's the value chain. Now, you may have seen it before, you may have heard about it before. That's it on a page. Now, in government, we like to come up with policies, frameworks, structures, etc. And within the context of digital government, we also have a model framework. And I want to speak through that quickly because I would like to give, especially the service providers, or what we call them technology partners. We don't actually call them service providers. We call them technology partners. I actually meant to ask, is there anyone from academia in the room? I know there was quite a few from academia, and I didn't actually acknowledge that. Oh, is there anyone from academia here today? They came on day 1. Great. One surviving person from academia. So academia is very important also, and I'll speak to that later. So this is a model framework, a digital government model framework, which was developed by UNDESA, which is United Nations, and the DESA is something we'll explain later. And over about 15 to 20 years of research, they came up with a framework which we could use to ensure that your digital government strategies would derive the value that it's required. And you'll see there in terms of the framework, it answers the 5 key questions. So this is Western Cape government's adaptation of the United Nations model framework. It's slightly different, but it still answers the why, the what, the who, and the how. So we have an interprovincial forum, and we spoke about this the other day, and we looked at how do we apply this now across all the provinces in South Africa. With it took us about 30 minutes to come up with, in the provinces that we had in the room, how do you adapt it within your own context? But it gives you a nice frame and a nice opportunity, or good opportunity, nice not a good word, good opportunity to then look at it within the context of what are all the elements that you require in terms of digital transformation. So it speaks to the ecosystem. It starts with strategic alignment. How do you strategically align? And as a country, we always start with the international space first. And those are Sustainable Development Goals, which also came through yesterday. I think quite encouragingly, there was at least one innovator who showed the SDGs and their product aligned to the SDGs. And then there are the national and the provincial imperatives. You know, looking at what am I doing to realize the dream of this province? So what's the dream of this province? I'm not going to put anyone on the spot, but think about that for the moment. What's the vision of this province, and how's digital transformation going to get you there? Then it looks at the outcomes and the strategies, and within the context of the Western Cape, we have one outcome. That's a digitally empowered and enabled Western Cape, right? And we can change that. We can say a digitally empowered and enabled South Africa, digitally empowered and enabled KwaZulu-Natal. And a lot of what we learned this morning in this morning session spoke about empowerment and enablement within the context. And I'll speak to that later again when we get to that. Then the focus areas we yesterday put forward in terms of KZN were, you know, what are those, well, it wasn't called focus areas, and the word now slips me in terms of, you know, what it was called, yeah. But it's the same thing. And there were 5 which were put forward, looking at what are the key things that we will look at, we'll focus on specifically over the next 5 years. And then the stakeholders are the people. And as I said, I inadvertently left out academia. But academia is a key partner. In fact, when we started to look at it from the context of the Western Cape and other provinces, when we've gotten the feedback from them, is we've always thought of academia of just an FYI along the road. We don't develop services for academia. But in fact, when we started the consult process, it became very clear to us that they are actually not only a contributor, but we actually can provide services for academia through perhaps, and Sadile will be happy to hear this, through a data portal. One of the innovators yesterday, I don't think he's in the room today, put the minister, the provincial minister of transport on the spot and said, you know, I've got this great innovation, but you don't want to give me access to data. Now, it's not a frivolous request. It can be done in a secure and scalable way. You know, acknowledging, I think those of you that were here yesterday, and you are parents, you found affinity with that application that the gentleman was doing. But it is something that can happen through this. So just to maybe go to the last one, and it's again, principles is kind of the how of it. And we all speak the same language, right? You heard it coming through this morning. Secure and digital by design, open by default. I mean, you could have written my script for me in terms of the principles that were discussed this morning. So this gives us a good lens in terms of all of the components. But the most important one for me is the one about measuring impact. Because that's putting yourself putting yourself in the spotlight and getting like-minded, objective stakeholders to kind of look at how you are doing things. And within the Western Cape, in fact, it's not the Western Cape, it's DPSA, has put forward a digital maturity assessment, which can be used as a good lens in terms of measuring our maturity. And within the context of that digital maturity model, which is based on CMMI, by the way, they look at a couple of components. The first is looking at strategy. The second is looking at citizen experience, the employee, culture, processes, and technology last. Because yes, technology is important in terms of a digital transformation journey. But as I said from the key takeaways, as our good doctor said yesterday, technology is not the panacea. It is the people and the culture. And if you do not focus on all of those dimensions at an equal rate in government, you are setting yourself up for failure. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next slide. But before I go there, I wanted to ask the question around digital leadership. I already said all of you are digital leaders. And I'm just going to ask you to think about this model framework and think of it within the context of those three principles, which the Premier said is the foundation of the strategy for KZN. Ethics, inclusion, and accountability. How do we drive this within the context of this model framework for KZN? So I'm going to ask you not to shout out. We're not going to use a roving mic. You're just going to talk to the person next to you, the good old-fashioned way. Talk to the person next to you. It's not a Teams meeting. It's a team meeting, right? We've come together as a team to talk about and to enable digital transformation for KZN. So yes, unfortunately, Pierre, that does mean you've got to leave that laptop and speak to Tembisa next to you. Do you see in this model framework ethics, inclusion, and accountability? And if so, where? And I'm going to give you 5 minutes, then I can drink some water, to just have that conversation with the person in the room next to you. So, Pala, we don't have a partner. We're going to find someone for you very quickly. And if you are 3 people, it's fine. You know, we like literate individuals, numerate individuals, but we sometimes just blink our eyes. So if you're 3, that's also fine. Have that conversation. Where do you see in this framework ethics, inclusion, and accountability? Because I'm using this as an opportunity for you to evaluate this model framework and see if it is applicable for KZN. So 5 minutes, starting now, though I've only got 9 minutes left in terms of the time. I'm probably going to go over by 2 minutes.